You're Jimmy, right? This is your house?
Sure is.
I'm Winston Wolfe. I solve problems.
I got a lovely little map here, which is totally authentic, I promise you. I totally didn't just run down and bought a whiteboard at my local DG, and I totally did not cut my finger trying to open this. This is going to become a very bloody episode in more ways than one.
They have their own names. I actually named them based off of what I wanted the name of and what would sound like a power metal band. I got their names right here so that we can go through them right quick for you. Give me a second.
By all means, James, while you're doing that, if you're wondering why I keep looking up.
Is there a cat up there?
There is a cat up there.
There's always a damn cat.
He's not supposed to be up there. And he has a thing for plastic and paper. And for many, many months,
books are made of those.
Yeah. I thought this top shelf's the one area he could not get to. Well, he found the way this week. And alarmingly, he's currently scratching a copy of Abbey Road, which is up there for some reason. I'm about ready to grab him. So while you're searching, talking, I'm going to be right back.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Lorenda show. Oh my goodness, what a day. What a day on our hands. But yeah, we have 14 different tribes. I was working on them because, oh, look at that lovely cat.
I propose we shift our focus to the Western theater. Woof. You sure you want to do that, Johnny? I do. Prepare to quake in your boots, Billy Yank, and allow me to present the most daring cavalry commander of the war. You know him. You love him. It's Nathan Bedford Forrest. Woo! 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 Woo!
The site is now grandly marked by the Soldiers' National Monument. No? Okay, I'm being told the monument in fact does not mark the site of the speeches. Okay, how about this elegant rostrum? After all, both Roosevelts have given speeches here. All right, so this bust of the president denotes the spot, right? No, you're telling me nobody knows where one of the most famous speeches of the 19th century delivered, on one of the most well-documented battlefields, mind you.
She shot. I'm sorry, John Brown. Damn. That's so good. She shot down. You literally the most emotional fucking moment of this entire. You blew it. You blew it. Damn, Shotty. Oh no. It's good.
Yeah. So I had somebody just join our streams like, oh man, this guy loves history. And I'm just about to ruin it all. Welcome to Readout Productions, where one moment I can be talking about history, the next moment I'm talking about waifus.
It's the wonder of nature, baby!
Good evening. Welcome to this edition of Uncut History. Here we are, another week, another Thursday, and it's not any Thursday. It's not any particular day. It's a certain day. You probably could have guessed a month away what I was going to do for this week's stream, considering what date it landed upon. But before we get to that, how's everybody doing this evening? Got Maji. She stopped in briefly to say hello before she got mauled by the general public. Yep, we'll just leave it at that. Next, we got Tim Allen. Well, why not? Good Lord, man. Why not what? And then Wrangler is here present as well. So, how's everybody doing? I gotta be quite honest. I'm pretty low energy. That's not good. We still got Friday and Saturday. I gotta get for the rest of the week. And I work on the weekends. That's my main income on the weekends. Not that I have a problem with that, but normally I'm not this fatigued. It might have to do with the fact that I've been blitzing through projects. You probably know that I was trapped with my college assignments for most of the fall. Wasn't able to work on a lot of videos. Well, I got through my finals a few weeks ago, and this was really my first major week that I had time to catch up on lost time on readout production projects. And I had worked on 3 different projects, one of which will be premiering to Saturday. Almost thought today was Friday. Oh boy, there. One of those 3 projects premieres Saturday, and the next 2 projects are for the next coming weeks. So a lot of cool stuff coming in the channel. We got a new edition of Retracing History, and we got a new series that's going to be premiering. And then we just got a random video, a random, mad, insane video that'll be out for the holiday. Can't wait for that. Oh, taking me to recharge. That's true too. I don't like it getting dark early. But hey, I had enough energy to go to my local Dollar General and buy some decor. We can make the studio a little bit festive, bring some festive char there. Look at that. Don't put anything in those, they'll just fall right down. And actually, probably shouldn't have put those up knowing that I have 3 cats that love things that hang down. So let's see if we can get through the whole month. Let's see if we can get through multiple streams without those being dragged down. Oh, Maji's on lunch. Hello. They allowed her out, but only temporarily. All right, no more delay. You know what today is. It's December 7th. I think we're all familiar with what happened 82 years ago. The attacks on the naval and air bases in Pearl Harbor. So this is not going to be an in-depth dive into the history of Pearl Harbor. As much as I would love to do that, that is a project for another time. But I'm not going to let this date escape me without commemorating it in some capacity. So what we're actually going to do, this is a special edition of the Preservation Shoutout, and that's usually my fallback gimmick for Uncut History, where we'll go through different historical sites and I'll give them a shout out. I'll show you, hey, we got a cool museum in Wyoming. We got a cool museum in Detroit. No, not Detroit. That was a reference probably nobody in the chat gets. But that's essentially what the Preservation Shoutout is. That's my fallback for what we're going to do for our live stream. Well, this time it's going to be themed around Pearl Harbor. We're going to look at a couple different museums and a couple different memorials to commemorate and preserve the memory of the events that occurred 82 years ago. So, without further ado, we will give a quick recap of what happened. So, on December 7th, 1941, the Empire Japan attacked the United States Naval and Air Force bases at Pearl Harbor and on the island of Oahu within the Hawaii Islands. The whole plan of this attack was the Japanese military and Navy were going to launch multiple offensives into the Pacific, try to capture multiple islands at the same time. And this was in response to the United States cutting off oil and other essential resources as Japan continued to invade China in the 1930s. The United States put an oil embargo on Japan, and as a result, Japan decided to invade all of the South Pacific. And at the same time doing that, they tried to knock out all of the United States military forces in the Pacific so the Japanese could roll over the Philippines, Guam, the Mariana Islands, all the different archipelagos in the Pacific, and create a massive empire for Japan. Now, what ends up happening is they're going to launch the first air fleet, aka Kido Butai, which was a fleet of 6 aircraft carriers in the Japanese Imperial Navy. They are going to move about 200 miles to the northwest of the Hawaiian Islands. And in the early morning hours of December 7th, they launched 2 waves of air assaults. The first wave is going to attack around 7:40 a.m. And in addition to targeting the actual naval base, they're also going to target the various airfields along the Oahu Island. The second wave would come in about an hour later and try to pick off whatever wasn't hit within the first attack. Now, contrary to popular belief, because a lot of people believe that the United States had no idea that an attack was going to happen. Oh no, the United States had many warnings that there was going to be some sort of attack on Pearl Harbor. In fact, in the weeks leading up to the attack, the United States, the Navy Air Force had essentially, instead of having their airplanes in the hangars, they thought it would be a good idea to line them all up on the tarmac as protocol so they can keep a watchful eye on all the airplanes. The reason being, they thought the attack that was coming to Pearl Harbor was going to be either a fleet of battleships that are going to try to breach into the harbor, or it was going to be sabotage, that simultaneous bombs would go off on Pearl Harbor. We all know what actually happened. The United States did not believe that the Japanese Navy could bring carriers that far away from the home islands, but they did. At this point in time, the Japanese had arguably the best carrier fleet in the world at the time, and were probably the best of, I don't know what it is. They were probably the most skilled with using airplanes in combat. Reason being, they'd been doing it for several years now in China. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to see a map here of the actual harbor. You'll see Fort Highland in the middle. The main targets of the attack were to take out the battleship fleet of the United States Pacific Fleet, and as well take out their fleet of aircraft carriers. They did half of that. They were able to take out almost all of the battleships in the Pacific Fleet within the 2 waves of attack. They weren't able to take the aircraft carriers out because they were not in port the day of attack. Now, spies for the Japanese that were in Pearl Harbor actually told Kido Butai about this a few days in advance, that you're not going to get the carriers. So they try to do the next best thing and take out Battleship Row. Of course, this would have dire consequences for the rest of the Second World War. Now, within those 2 attacks, over 2,000 Americans were killed, another 1,000 were wounded, and about half of those casualties came from the attacks on the USS Arizona. And that's where we're going to begin our preservation shout out tonight. No, 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 it's not bad, Manji. We're 80 years removed from this conflict. So, I'm getting distracted already. I hear noises. I hear noises happen out of the room. I'm always suspicious of what's happening. So probably the most famous of the battleships that were sunk at Pearl Harbor is the USS Arizona. This ship was actually constructed at the early 20th century, but got a heavy re-outfitting in the 1930s. So it was as modern as the United States Navy could anticipate being modern. Of course, the USS Arizona would be in the Second World War for all of about half an hour, because, as we all know, there were two different ways that the Japanese air fleets were attacking these ships in Pearl Harbor. One of them was by torpedoes, those that were open to the channel. So the battleships are on the outside. I'm getting so distracted because my cat is being, hey, I love you, Lily, but I also fear you because I don't know if you want attention or you're trying to bite me. The outer ring of Battleship Row, those ships were targeted by the torpedo bombers of the Japanese Air Force that attacked. The USS Oklahoma, which we'll get to in a moment, was capsized and actually lead to, I think, the second highest casualty losses during the attack. You'll see the West Virginia in red as well. That was taken down by torpedoes. The Nevada was taken down by a torpedo, but the Nevada actually found a way to get unmoored, and they tried to make a break for the Pacific Ocean, but bombs were bombs were able to slow the ship down, and it had to beach. So the outer ring of Battleship Row was targeted with torpedoes. The inner ring would be targeted by dive bombers. And I think it was like 4 or 5 different bombs hit the USS Arizona. And I think it was the 4th bomb, actually. That was the one that hit its forward magazine. And this is actually a still from a 28-second reel of film that documented the detonation of the powder magazine. The ship was completely devastated by the explosion. Oil was thrown all over the neighboring ships, which caused other battleships to catch ablaze as a result of the attack on the USS Arizona. And about half of the fatalities you hear about from Pearl Harbor come from the USS Arizona, from this one ship, from this one explosion. Now, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, although all the battleships had been either sunk or heavily damaged, because they'd all been sunk in the harbor and they were sunk in the middle of the Pacific Fleet's naval yards, it only took a few months time for some of these ships to be raised back out of the water and put into dry dock and repaired. And you would actually see some of these ships being used in attacks later in the Pacific theater. They'd be used to bombard islands like Iwo Jima and Okinawa before the war's over. And I even think 1 or 2 of them were transferred to the Atlantic Fleet and used to bombard the beaches of Normandy during D-Day. I'm not certain on that. So a lot of these ships that were damaged, sunk, considered to be gone, well, because of the, I guess you want to call it the war machine of the United States of America, they were able to be re-equipped and sent back out to sea. There were only 2 ships that were left sunk in Pearl Harbor. We're going to talk about both of them. The first is, of course, the USS Arizona. The detonation of the forward powder magazine made this a total loss. And of the 1,100 crew members that were killed on board, over 900 were left entombed inside. No, not entombed. Over 900, I believe, were unidentified, and many of those were left entombed inside the ship. As such, it is considered a war grave today in the United States, and you've probably seen images of the memorial before. The memorial actually wasn't put up there until the 1960s, and even before then, they really didn't do any memorial for it until about the 9th anniversary of the attacks of the 1950s, when they actually put a flagstaff on top of the remains of the ship. So the flagstaff that you see by the memorial today is directly tethered to the wreck of the USS Arizona, which has left to a myth that people say that it's still technically commissioned the U.S. Navy. It's not. It was stricken to 1942 from the record, but it does have a flag always flying over 24/7, or sunrise to sunset. Man, I'm sorry. I'm getting confused. Sorry. I'm gonna drink some water. That's a good idea. So there we are. USS Arizona Memorial is probably the most famous memorial at Pearl Harbor commemorating the attacks. There is the symbolism behind the memorial, because if you've seen images of it, it kind of sags in the middle. The idea is that one end is to represent the United States before Pearl Harbor. The sag is to represent the attack that set us back by several months and getting into the Second World War. But the other half comes out strong, showing that the United States would ultimately be victorious. To visit the USS Arizona Memorial, you have to have a time ticket. I think you have to have at least like 8. I think it has to be like at least 8 weeks in advance. You have to book your ticket to actually go out there, because they can only have a certain amount of capacity travel to the memorial in one day. And it's the most heavily visited spot relating to the attacks on Pearl Harbor. Now, as I mentioned, this was one of 2 ships that were deemed a total loss and were not used in the, were not raised. And very briefly, here's the website. You can visit the USS Arizona Memorial today. It is part of the Pearl Harbor National Memorial. It's the only naval base to actually be part of the National Park Service. Now, interestingly enough, I came across this, and I decided this was last minute, because of the infamy the name USS Arizona carries, because of its legacy. And if you notice over my shoulder, I do have a few mementos from Pearl Harbor. I have never got to visit the memorial personally, but a couple of my relatives actually lived on Oahu for about a decade and made several visits. So I got quite the collection of memorabilia from the visitor center and other museums. So I got a cap for the ship. I will not wear that hat. The reason being that cap, in my opinion, should be reserved only for veterans of that ship. So I have it merely as a memento in my collection. And then there's a small model behind me. Actually, I can. It's beat up. It's very beat up. That's the model right there. You'll see it's missing some of its ordnance. I was given models way too young as a kid and broke a lot of them. And I have since not got into model collecting. And also got a lot of dust on it. It's been sitting on the shelf for a while. First time I think I've actually grabbed it in about 3 or 4 years off the shelf. Oh, wow. Fun fact, the Iwo Jima ships that were sunk are now resurfacing because of the magma buildup on the island. Yeah, there's a very high likelihood that what's on that island probably ain't going to survive for a few more years. All right. So, what was I doing? All right. No, I didn't want to remove it. Wow. I am really off, guys. I mean, I'm normally off on my streams. Let's be honest. I'm normally not mentally stable on my streams, but boy, is this a new level. The fatigue is setting in. But what I wanted to talk about is because of the infamy of the USS Arizona, there have been multiple segments of the ship that have been salvaged to turn into memorials across the United States. And Wikipedia got a small little list of them. So Arizona State Capitol has several items relating to the memorial, including a 500-pound piece of the superstructure. And you can see that right here. It's actually in the thumbnail, piece of the superstructure. And believe it or not, believe it or not, the superstructure for many years. So when we're talking about the superstructure, let me go back. The towers of these battleships, the towers, the portions above the deck, that's the superstructure. Well, they had to take it all off in order to put the memorial on, and so no ships would get snagged into it. I think they put it off like somewhere on the Oahu Island. They just dumped the whole superstructure. And I think at least up until the late 1990s, you could go visit it. The whole superstructure, the towers and everything were just in the forest around the Pearl Harbor Naval Base. I don't think they're still around. I think either they rusted up or they were all cut up into mementos. But I know for many years the superstructure was this like unknown thing. And like, well, if you have access to it, yeah, you can just go see the towers, the iconic towers of the ship. Just sit it in the forest. It was weird. But in addition to that, they have one of the flags that flew over the ship when it was attacked. They also have 59 pieces of the ship's silver service, which were donated to the men of the Arizona by citizens of the state. Additional silverware that were donated by the citizens to the shipmates. Then at the VA Medical Center in Phoenix, Arizona, they have another piece of the superstructure. Yeah, it says this was dedicated in 1998, so I sense that the superstructure is no longer around on the island. They must have cut it up in the late 1990s. Then in Glendale, Arizona, there's 2 monuments. These were actually made out of pieces of the potato locker of the Arizona. So I think everything you're seeing there in the image is all metal from the potato locker of the USS Arizona. Interesting way to commemorate it. And then at the University of Arizona, they actually have one of the ship's bells up in their bell tower. At Wesley Bullen Memorial Park, also in Phoenix, they got several pieces, including the upper portion of the signal mast. They got one of the anchors of the Arizona, which I believe were actually cast in Pennsylvania. One of the 14-inch guns that were on the Arizona. And then this last piece here, this is actually on the USS South Dakota, which is a battleship that is now a museum ship. They have a piece of the battleship within the hull of the ship today. So, and I think there are there are more pieces than this, but these are the big pieces that have been taken off of the wreckage and turned into memorials across the country. The USS Arizona is the most famous ship to be sunk at Pearl Harbor, but of course it was not the only one. If you wonder why I pause, it's mostly because I'm reading your guys' chat. Oh, no. Cool. That means they will soon have new real estate. No, that's not how that works, Wrangler. The Marines and the Japanese government aren't going to allow you just to move on Iwo Jima. They only are. I mean, the only time you have access to the island of Iwo Jima is for the anniversary. Japan has. It's still part of. It's technically. Oh, how to word this? Of course, it's always been part of Japan. The island of Iwo Jima has been part of Japan before the war, during the war, after the war, and it actually comes under the jurisdiction of the Tokyo district. It's technically under Tokyo's administration. And the reason that's important is when the United States Marines landed on Iwo Jima, they said, well, technically we're now invading the main islands, which isn't true. The main island, the only major main island they invaded was Okinawa, which was even then was not really part of the big main mass. But my point being, they're like, well, technically the Tokyo Perificator? I can't speak tonight, guys. The Tokyo district. We're going to say that the Tokyo district had jurisdiction over Iwo Jima before, and I think it might still be in terms of how the government's set up in Japan. My point being, the only way you can get to Iwo Jima as a citizen is if you are able to get access to the anniversary events. And I believe once the last veterans die off, those will no longer be happening. I think they're going to stop doing that once the last of the veterans pass away, and then the island will not be able to be accessed by public officials at all. It's a volcanic island with a base for the United States Marine Corps. The United States Marine Corps, I think, the United States Marine Corps borrowed it from Japan. Right there. So yeah, that's that. All right. Read out. Got to get back on this roll. So the USS Arizona is one of two ships that still remain on the bottom of Pearl Harbor from the attacks. The other is what you're looking at right now. This is the USS Utah. It's a dreadnought battleship built just before the First World War. And after that conflict, it became reused as a target ship. Now, target ships can be used literally to be targets to be sunk by newer ships. Or in the case of the USS Utah, was used for gunnery training. So it was still active in the Navy. They call it a target ship, but they actually had a crew assigned to it and everything to train new members of the Navy on how to operate guns on a warship. Well, on the morning of December 7th, 1941, the USS Utah was on the north side of Ford Island. And why that's important is you can see here on the map, this is the north side of Ford Island, and this is where the first wave of airplanes are going to come toward the row of ships. So the Japanese air attack is coming from the north. It's coming right at the USS Raleigh, which is a cruiser, and the USS Utah, former battleship. Where those ships were moored, just to their south, should be the aircraft carriers. In fact, you'll even see on the map there are service facilities for the carriers. That is where they're instructed to attack. There were no carriers. They saw these two ships and went, well, destroy them anyways. They have something to do with the carriers. So this target ship was one of the first casualties of the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was sunk before the Arizona even was. And after taking a couple torpedoes and bombs, you can see this photograph was taken. The USS Utah started to list and settled on the bottom. Over 50 servicemen were killed on board the USS Utah, one of the first casualties of the attacks. Now, they attempted to salvage the ship like it did others, but they were having difficulty with getting it to roll back straight. In fact, when they would start rolling it back up, it would start kicking off the bottom and sliding even deeper into the water. And considering they weren't really going to use it for anything more than practice for new shipmates, they decided to just leave it rest on the bottom of Pearl Harbor. And there is a memorial to it today. This one you cannot access. Yeah, I guess this is going to be the trend of the video. I'm going to show you. We're going to talk about memorials and historic sites that you can't access because they're still active in the United States military. So in 1972, there was a memorial dedicated on the north side of Ford Island. And you can actually see some photographs here. There's a good aerial view. You can see the rusted outline of the Utah. There's an up close of the Utah at sunset. You can see the rusted, I believe this would be the I think it would have been the starboard side of the ship. I'm probably wrong again. I'm going crazy. There's another photograph. So you can see the whole ship still sitting there and a small portion of its hull is sticking out to the surface. And there are crew members that are still entombed in the USS Utah as well. Another reason why I decided ultimately not to salvage it. So this is on the north side of Ford Island. It is not accessible to the general public due to being an active military base. It's the forgotten memorial to Pearl Harbor. Everybody knows about the USS Arizona Memorial. Few know about the USS Utah. And essentially, those 50 sailors that were killed on board that morning, they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. This was not one of the main targets of the attacks. I don't even think the Japanese Air Force even fully knew about it being there. But because it was in the location where the carrier should have been, it was attacked. I'm going to drop a link, in fact, if you want to go to the website. It gives you a full history behind the USS Utah. There you are. In the chat we go. Tim Allen's talking about volcanoes shooting islands up into the air. Ooh, let's play this. I'm not going to put the audio on, but underwater footage of the USS Utah. I mean, we're at the point now where we're about 80 years removed. Unfortunately, a lot of it seems to be unrecognizable. Although that looks like a gun. That does look like a gun. That's pretty cool, showing what's below and what's below the waterline. I can't speak today. I am so sorry, guys. Now, to the third memorial. Now, there are many memorials, obviously, at Pearl Harbor. I am highlighting the 3 relating to key warships that were sunk that day. There, of course, the attack was not just about the battleship fleet. A lot of the attack was focused on the airfields on the island of Oahu. About, I think, 300 aircraft were destroyed as a result of the attack. And again, because the United States Navy Air Force decided, well, we expect we're going to be attacked. We think they're going to try to sabotage by bombing the hangar. So instead of having the airplanes in the hangars, we're going to put them out on the tarmac in a straight line, which made them perfect targets for when the airwaves did strike on December 7th. But our final memorial, Pearl Harbor, I want to talk about is the USS Oklahoma Memorial. Now, we actually talked about it earlier. The USS Oklahoma was sunk by torpedoes and capsized in Pearl Harbor. It was one of the earlier ships struck. I think it was anywhere from like 6 to 8 torpedoes and bombs ultimately put it to the bottom of the harbor. If you watch the infamous Michael Bay movie Pearl Harbor, to be fair to them, they actually give a considerable amount of attention to the capsizing of the Oklahoma, and they had a pretty darn large-scale prop to demonstrate it. They basically had reconstructed the whole bow of the Oklahoma and then used CGI for the aft end. Of course, that scene also has the infamy of having an actor playing a Navy sailor cry he can't swim, which... Okay, let's stop talking about Pearl Harbor by Michael Bay. Go watch Tora Tora Tora. It's it's not the just better Pearl Harbor movie. It's one of the best movies documenting the Second World War. Go check out Tora Tora Tora. It's 2.5 hours. May not be for everybody's taste, but if you want to have a pretty darn good idea of the key players and the key events in Pearl Harbor done in a realistic way, go see that. Anyways, USS Oklahoma capsized and 429 of its crew members were killed as a result. They tried to, when it capsized, they had a frantic effort trying to break through the bottom of the ship. They tried to get welders out there. They were only able to save a few of the survivors. Most of them would ultimately drown in the bulkheads below. The memorial here, I think we're just going to read a little bit. We're just going to read a little bit here. We're going to pearlharbor.org. We're just going right to the source. In honor of the men killed when Oklahoma capsized, the USS Oklahoma Memorial stands on Ford Island, directly adjacent to the battleship Missouri, which is moored where Oklahoma once was on December 7th. The memorial provides details about the once mighty battleship and features 429 white markers, one for each of the crew lost during the attack. It's located near the entrance of the USS Missouri. You can visit the memorial on all tours to the Missouri. The USS Oklahoma Memorial is one of the newer sites at Pearl Harbor, constructed in 2007. This memorial honors the crewmen and Marines of the Oklahoma. On the day of the attack, less than a third of the Oklahoma's crew escaped. Unlike the Arizona, however, the Navy salvaged the Oklahoma and brought it back to the surface in November of 1943. All bodies were recovered and given a proper burial. What you're going to see: using black granite and marble, the design wished to symbolize the strong hull of the battleship and the lives of its crewmates. The white marble used for each post represents the color of the uniform worn by the brave sailors of the Navy, while the rimrod straight posture represents the crew standing at attention, manning the rails of the USS Oklahoma forever. That's interesting design. I'm learning a lot of this right now. I've known about the memorial, but even my relatives never had the chance to visit it, as far as I'm aware. With 12 torpedoes launched against her, the Oklahoma took the brunt of attacks at Pearl Harbor. 9 of those hit their mark. The torpedo attack ripped open holes in its hull and caused it to list 40 degrees. Eventually, she turned turtle and rolled 130 degrees, and 429 men were lost. It was a Nevada-class battleship moored on Battleship Row next to her namesake sister class. Nevada-class battleships were oil-fired instead of coal-fired like the USS Arizona. She was also smaller than the Arizona at 583 feet and 2,700 tons. Oklahoma was commissioned in 1916. Where did the Oklahoma sink? While the whereabouts of many ships sunk in World War II have been discovered, Oklahoma's final resting place remains a mystery. What is known is that she was approximately 5 to 7 miles northeast of Oahu when the storm threatened to sink the tugs that were towing her. In an effort to save themselves, the crews of the Hercules and Monarch, the tugboats, released the cables tethered to the battleship and let her sink to the bottom of the Pacific, in water far deeper than Pearl Harbor. Her exact coordinates were never reported by the crews that were pulling her to California, making her location a huge challenge to any search team. It's not impossible that she'll eventually be found, especially since, okay, we're just going to stop reading there. I don't really feel like talking about Microsoft. So yeah, that's the USS Oklahoma Memorial. Like I said earlier, I believe this is the second. This ship had the second highest losses during the attacks. All right, I'm gonna get a drink of water. The problem I have with Midway, it reuses a lot of footage of Tora Tora Tora. And that's not me just saying they were just doing the same thing. No, they literally just used film from Tora 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 and slapped it into Midway. It's not a bad portrayal. I got to be honest, the Roland Emmerich film that came out in 2018, 2019, I adore it. And I am weird to say that I adore a Roland Emmerich film. The guy that made The Patriot, this guy can't do history. Somehow, for one historical feature, he decided to get it right, and it was about Midway. That movie I don't think it's for everybody. I've always told that. I'm like, it's a dry movie, but for something to do but to give a very good overview of the first year of the Pacific War, hot damn, did he do a good job. It was one thing for him to cover the Battle of Midway in detail, but to also cover the attack on Pearl Harbor and the aftermath of the Doolittle raid, to cover all of that. And we do give some brief allusions to other naval conflicts that occurred leading up to the attack at Midway. My hat's off to Emmerich on that one movie. I know everybody likes the 76 Midway, but I feel the 2018, 2019 Midway blew it out of the water. All right, so we're going to jump over because we need to talk a little bit about the Air Force. Like I said, that's an equal component of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And I have been told a lot of good things about this museum, the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum. It's located on Ford Island, on Ford Island, which was the epicenter of the attack. The experience. The museum actually gives you access to the Ford Island Tower, which was standing at the time of the attack, and is a landmark in most photographs. Actually, I can't see in that one. I didn't grab the other one. There's another photograph by the Japanese that was taken during the attack, and you can see it. No, back to this. Ooh, look, they got an exhibit on the Arizona. Yeah, of course they have an exhibit on the Arizona. I'm going very quiet because I'm just getting into the groove of things. Want to see. All right, our collection. So let's go through their collection. They got quite the collection of aircraft. If I'm not mistaken, I think they have one of the only surviving wrecks of is it a Zero, of a Japanese Zero? It's not an attack one, it's a wreck. I wonder if they have it on their collection page. So, oh no, it wasn't a Zero, it was a Kate. Yeah, so this was found just a few years ago. The first model of the Kate was the B5N1 and had its operating debut during the conflict in China. It was used both as a torpedo plane and as a conventional bomber. The second version was the B5N2, which began its combat career at Pearl Harbor when 144 of these planes took part in the attack. It proved to be Japan's best carrier-based torpedo bomber until 1944. The Nakajima B5N1 carrier-based torpedo bomber, Kate, was designed in 1935 by Nakajima Design Team under the supervision of Katsuji Nakamura and went into production as the Navy Type 97 Model 1 attack bomber in 1937. It was soon discovered to be extremely vulnerable to any modern fighter aircraft, so in 1939, the B5N2 was designed and put into production. At the outbreak of the war, the B5N2 was considered obsolete, yet still an effective torpedo attack aircraft. The reason I'm bringing this up, as far as I'm aware, I think this is like one of, if not the only surviving Kate bomber, and it's only surviving because either it crashed during the attack or it was dredged up from underwater. I forget what's the story behind it. And there's some photographs of Kates taken off of the Japanese carriers for the attack. So that's one of the things you can actually go and see at Pearl Harbor. Trying to see if it tells us. I don't think it does. But I think that's what was key about this. It's one of the only Kate bombers that are still surviving in some capacity. Obviously, it's not intact. It's a crashed or sunken one that they dredged up. But one of the many. Oh, there we are. Hey, look who it is. When introduced in 1940, the Mitsubishi A6M2, codenamed Zeke, was the best carrier-based fighter in the world, aka the Japanese Zero for Japanese system identified aircraft by the last two digits of the year accepted into service. Since the A6M you see in this exhibit was accepted in Japanese calendar year of 1940, the aircraft was designated as Navy Type 00 carrier-based fighter. The Allied forces nicknamed it Zeke. The Zero's lightweight design made it fast and maneuverable, having a high power and weight. Yep. Yeah, so they do have a Zero in their collection. I was pretty confident they had one. Of course, probably the most famous fighter plane that was ever created by the Japanese Japanese Empire. So, yeah, sorry if I'm getting boring. My brain's gone crazy, and I just enjoy reading. I like reading this stuff. I'm learning stuff. So, the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum got a cool collection of aircraft, including 2 Japanese aircraft, one of the only surviving Kate planes that I know about, and they do have a restored Zero in their collections. History Underground did a video of his visit there a few months back. If you haven't, check out that video. He goes into more detail than I ever can. All right. Anyways, I'm getting really boring. So we're actually going to jump back over to the United States to talk about the National Museum of the Pacific War, because the attack on Pearl Harbor got the United States involved in what became known as the Pacific War against Japan, aka the Pacific Theater of the Second World War. And interestingly enough, the National Museum of the Pacific War, any guesses where it's at? It's probably not where you're expecting it to be. It is in Fredericksburg, Texas, not Virginia. I think I got you guys there for a moment. Not Virginia, not the Civil War one. Fredericksburg, Texas. Any guesses why it's in Texas? Well, because this is the home of... Oh, I guess I'm not going quick enough to give the dramatic reveal. I am completely off, guys, and I'm sorry. There we are, because it's the hometown of Admiral Nimitz, who was the admiral for the Pacific Fleet throughout the Second World War. The Admiral Nimitz Gallery explores the life and career of Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz through interactive multimedia exhibits and aircrafts from his life. Artifacts from his life and career. Completed in February of 2020, the 4.5 million renovations expanded the space, honoring the life of Fredericksburg native Admiral Chester Nimitz by 50%. Modernized with state-of-the-art yeah, we know, you're interactive. So they have the National Museum of the Pacific got a whole portion, like a whole exhibit, a whole portion of it is devoted to their hometown hero, Chester Nimitz, who would take charge of the Pacific Fleet after the attack on Pearl Harbor. And they got a whole bunch of stuff relating to Nimitz. Nimitz is also key in strategizing the Midway campaign that would happen the following year. Ooh, look, I think it's his coat. So, yes. But that's not all they got. Of course, that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is the Pacific War Museum. Of course, they're going to have something on Pearl Harbor. And you're going to notice that's not aircraft. That's a submarine. Actually, it's a mini submarine. Because an unknown aspect to the attack on Pearl Harbor, it was not just an airborne attack. The Japanese Navy also launched 5 midget submarines to try to get into Pearl Harbor, to try to get inside the harbor during the attack to sink them. So they were trying to sink above and under the water. They were trying to sink the United States Pacific Fleet. Now, the midget submarines were not entirely effective. One was spotted by the USS Ward, a destroyer at the mouth of Pearl Harbor, and the Ward would actually fire the very first shot of the Pacific War and were able to get a direct hit on the midget submarine, although they were never able to confirm their strike until a half century later when they located the wreck of the midget submarine. Got a hole right in the conning tower. Yep, they got it. So the United States we can brag and say that the first shot that the United States Navy fired in the Second World War was a success. Gotta have bragging rights sometime. So their exhibit about Pearl Harbor actually has one of the midget submarines. I believe this was one of the midget submarines. The 2-man crew actually ran out of fuel, weren't able to get to their objective, and instead beached on Oahu and tried to blend into the background. It didn't work too well, and they ended up being rounded up once the Navy found this midget submarine sitting on the shore. I don't know if it's gonna... Oh, speaking of the war, they got the moored gun sight in their collection. This section examines the events of the attack of Pearl Harbor. Yep, we know that. Yep, little they know that they had just fired the first shots of World War II for the United States. There's the crew of the USS Ward the USS Ward's crew for gun number 3, which fired the United States' first shot in the war, and they actually have the gun sight. I don't know if it's the gun sight for the gun or just a gun sight from the crew. Nevertheless, it's very cool. I want to see if we can get one on the midget submarine though. Come on, I want to figure out which midget submarine this is. How's everybody doing? You enjoying the stream? This Japanese mini-sub, designated HA-19, was one of the 5 subs used to attack Pearl Harbor. The subs were developed expressly for this attack, designed for stealth and a small crew, complemented with just 2 men. It carried 2 torpedoes and had a top speed of 19 knots when submerged, making it fast and efficient for upcoming surprise attack. Number 19 ran aground outside the entrance of Pearl Harbor when its gyro compass failed and the crew was forced to abandon the ship. One of the men died while attempting to make it to shore, and the sub's pilot, Ensign Kazuo Sakamaki, became the first Japanese. Okay, so this is the one that washed ashore due to situations, was because of the gyroscope. And Sakamaki became the first Japanese prisoner of war in the United States custody. Number 19 was salvaged and toured across the nation for war bonds and made a stop in Fredericksburg, Texas, actually. The museum obtained the submarine in 1991 and initially displayed it before moving into the George H.W. Bush Gallery. So they do have the sub that ran aground. So there's the one that the war sunk. There's this one that ran aground. There was a third one that the USS Helena actually ran over during the attack. The USS Helena was one of the ships that got unmoored and tried to relocate it. And they recalled hitting like something metal, like the whole ship shook. And they end up salvaging this crushed midget submarine afterwards. So one of the midget subs did get in. Forget what happened to the fourth and fifth one. So there you are. Because I think I'm not certain, but I think the midget subs attacks, I think they were a full suicide attack. I don't think there was plans for them to come back. Now, staying in North America. Yeah, he did. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more. Now, this isn't so much with the attack itself. So before we leave, National Museum of the Pacific Wars in Fredericksburg, Texas. You can learn all about the United States involvement in the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas. And they have a large display on Admiral Nimitz, who took charge after the attack on Pearl Harbor, took charge of the Pacific Fleet. And they have artifacts relating to the attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, obviously, the major ramification for the attack on Pearl Harbor was the United States would enter the Second World War, which was something the United States had tried to avoid for 2 years. For 2 years of conflict in Europe, with Nazi Germany expanding into throughout Europe and into Northern Africa, the United States avoided getting directly involved, though we were supplying munitions and select amount of volunteers to the British and the French. But we didn't want to get involved in the war. And then Japan attacked Pearl Harbor because the United States had cut its oil supplies, which meant Japan couldn't really continue its conquest in China. Now, obviously the impact is we go to war. There is also a very big impact we don't often talk about, and that is in the months to follow, President Roosevelt is going to authorize the internment of all people of Japanese ancestry living inside the United States. And there were multiple internment camps set up throughout the country where Japanese Americans and people just assumed to have some sort of, wasn't really just Japanese Americans, really a lot of people that had any susceptible tie to being Asian descent were sent off to these internment camps. So they were remote, and a lot of these were in remote areas. And one of them has just recently started to develop a massive museum, which I did not know about until this summer. And that is the Hart Mountain Japanese American Confinement Site. We're going to learn a little bit about it here. If I can get to it. They also got a really cool website. Like they got a lot on their website. Go to digital exhibits. I'm just trying to find. So it's up in Wyoming. I know that much. And they have like the whole property where this internment camp was preserved. Well, they're going to try to preserve it. There's nothing really there except for the museum, but they do have a few of the barracks where they actually survived. Several of the barracks and a few ruins relating to the hospital survived. And I think the end goal is they're going to try to map the whole property out for walking tours. That's the other thing. These sites need one trend I'm having tonight. These sites need I would really like for all the websites we've traveled to tonight, if they would have just a nice intro, like, what are we? Oh, duh, Spencer. Maybe I should just hit the About page. Formed in 1996, the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation is a non-for-profit. The foundation works to preserve the remains of the World War II Japanese-American confinement site in Park County, Wyoming, and tell the stories of the more than 14,000 people who are incarcerated at this location. In August of 2011, the foundation opened the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center, a world-class museum dedicated to teaching this story for future generations. Read computer. I know I'm very off tonight. Don't be off tonight, you too. So we can go right to the Institute. For photographs, artifacts, oral histories, and interactive exhibits, visitors to the Interpretive Center experience life at Heart Mountain through the eyes of those Japanese and Japanese Americans who were confined here during the Second World War. The Interpretive Center provides computer. Stop acting like me. Don't be in kilter like me. The Interpretive Center provides an overview of the wartime relocation of Japanese Americans, including the background history of anti-Asian prejudice in America and the factors leading to their enforced relocation and confinement. Special emphasis is given to the experience of incarceration, the diverse personnel response. Come on, brain. Come on. The diverse personal responses of Japanese Americans to their imprisonment, constitutional issues, violations of civil liberties and civil rights, and the broader issues of race and social justice. Oh, there's that special word. This is one of the cool things they have here. One of the barracks, I mean, there were hundreds of these at the time of its operation. And of course, at the end of the war, the United States government tore it all apart. But one of them survived. One of the original barracks survived. A complete full-length barrack built at the Heart Mountain Relocation Center during World War II has been returned to its landmark. With tremendous response from individual donors and organizations, the barracks have been rescued from demolition near Shell, Wyoming. After being moved from Heart Mountain, it was one of the several barracks that the city of Grayball used for veterans housing. That's interesting. So United States veterans were actually put into a barrack that was meant for internment of Japanese Americans during the conflict. It endured another move to the ICU Geology's field station in 1958. Because it had been cut into 3 sections during these 2 moves, the building had to be moved back to Heart Mountain in 3 separate pieces to ensure structural integrity. To maintain historical accuracy, the barracks have been returned to where they once stood, 5 barracks as part of the military police complex. It will now remain a fixture of the landscape that can speak not only to the Japanese American confinement, but the extended Bighorn Basin history. That is cool. That is one of their coolest artifacts. Like I also mentioned, they have ruins of the hospital intact that they're currently trying to raise funds to restore. They also have the root cellar, which was actually built by the people interred there. The root cellar is special for many ways. It is the only surviving structure from the camp built by Japanese Americans. Construction began in the summer of 1942 as part of the camp's agriculture program. That year, the incarcerated laborers of the agriculture program accomplished what is known as the Heart Mountain Miracle, turning the dry Wyoming desert into a verdant farmland in less than a year. The cellar, built to hold produce for those fields, is more than 300 feet long and nearly 40 feet wide, yet it held less than half the vegetables needed to feed the Heart Mountain camp. Another identical cellar now collapsed once stood next to it. Without proper restoration, our cellar will suffer the same fate as its twin. The current project, which will only stabilize 32 feet of the structure, is just beginning. The incredible structure tells the tale of a Japanese-American community that refused to be broken and overcame incredible odds to feed and care for its people. We look to the day when we'll be able to safely open the cellar for the public. We ask that you help us in raising the funds necessary to complete these steps. So they're raising funds currently to preserve this site. So you know what that means, right? You're getting that link because we're not going to get a random shield tonight. This was all about shilling, about sites that preserve not just Pearl Harbor, but the impact afterwards. There's the link to the Heart Mountain Interpretive Center, and you can assist them in their efforts in preserving one of the last surviving structures on their property. So, yeah. And I want to talk about one thing very quickly. We've actually talked about this museum before. We're going to talk about one of their artifacts. The Pennsylvania Military Museum preserves 2 of the guns of the battleship Pennsylvania, which was in dry dock in Pearl Harbor the day of the attack and suffered heavy damage. Yep, it says right here, two of the battleship's guns. Sorry, guys, everything's like, I guess I'm having like what was it, like the anxiety, the stress ticks. I guess that's what's happening currently to me. Two of the battleship's guns, gun number 22 and gun number 28, were left on the ship during an overhaul in 1942, but were replaced in 45. The guns were relined and sent to the gun barrel storage yard in Virginia, where they remained for 50 years. They were rediscovered during a recent inventory, and the museum acquired them in 2009. So I don't think these guns were actually present during the attack, but were the guns put on the battleship after the attack to replace ones damaged and were used to bombard various parts of the Pacific theater, as it says here, from Alaska to Okinawa. So they are preserved now at the Pennsylvania Military Museum, which I'm hoping this winter we're going to go up there and do a visit, and we're going to do a full video on it. There are the guns. I think actually this weekend they should be doing an event relating to Pearl Harbor. If not, they were doing it today. Yeah, they were doing it today. 82 years ago, on December 7th, 1941, the U.S. Pacific Fleet of Hawaii was attacked. The tribute is held beneath the guns of the Pennsylvania, which was what? Oh, so nope, these were the guns on the Pennsylvania during the attack. Okay, so it was a witness. So they had a commemoration today, and I'm hoping to get out there this winter. We could go visit it. Okay, computer, I get it. I'm off kilter tonight. You're off kilter tonight. We're going to wrap the stream up. But first, I want to talk to the audience for a bit, okay? Okay. All right, so those are several sites at Pearl Harbor and here on the continental United States that preserve the memory and the impact of what happened 82 years ago today. No, it's kind of up in it's off of Route 22 roughly. It's dead middle in the state. It's in Boalsburg, Pennsylvania, not far from State College. It's I'm told the museum's not massive. It has a small collection, but what it does have is the home of a massive memorial to the 28th Infantry Division, aka the Bloody Bucket. So that's why I want to go up there someday. It's kind of holy ground for Pennsylvania military historians because it's the shrine of the 28th Infantry. Well, what's the name of it? It's not the Pennsylvania Military Museum. Sure, it has nothing to do with Gettysburg. Sure, it has nothing to do with Gettysburg. Oh, I know which one you're talking about now. You're talking about the Carlisle War College, aren't you? 81 goes for Carlisle, right? I gotta go look. There is a war museum. There is a war the United States Army has a war college in Carlisle. I'm going to say, yep, that's the one you're thinking of. So there is the Army War College is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and they have a full education center. There's a large outdoor exhibit. They have a certain type of fortification constructed from every major conflict. They have a reconstruction of Redoubt number 10, the redoubt that Alexander Hamilton led an assault on at Yorktown. They have a full reproduction of it at the Carlisle War College. You can visit us for the public. That's another one I want to go visit someday. I actually have one of their curators. He's autographed several of the books they have over the shelf there. He's a great guy, Doug Cubbleson. Best military historian when it comes to logistics. You want to know about the logistics side of the military? Contact Doug Cubbleson. He's one of the employees now at the Army Heritage Center in Carlisle. That's the one you're thinking of. I think their museum's actually bigger than the Pennsylvania Military Museum. But again, the Pennsylvania Military Museum got the 28th Infantry Division shrine. So it's holy ground in my eyes. So yeah. Okay. My brain's going crazy. I can't even remember the map to my own state right now. So, yeah, I had a lot of fun going through to learn new information. Like I said, if there was moments I was going quiet, it was either because I was reading your guys' comments or it's because I was just taking in all the information. It would be nice to someday go see Pearl Harbor, but I can say that about any historical location. That's a terribly long distance between Pittsburgh and going to Honolulu. That also requires me to go through an airport. Flying, I don't have a problem with, but I have to go through an airport, and I don't like going through an airport. So, yeah. So maybe the closest I get is doing these videos. But 82 years, when I grew up, I lived through, like when we hit the 70th and the 75th anniversaries, those were all big commemorations. And I think it was because there was still a decent amount of veterans that were around from the attacks. But I was just reading for the 82nd anniversary, there's only one survivor of the USS Arizona left. He was not able to attend the memorial services today. And I think only a handful of survivors of Pearl Harbor actually were able to make it to the commemoration. Well, passport, I'm not worried about that stuff. I can get the passport. That's not the problem. So it's we're getting to the point now that I really haven't noticed a lot of publicity today about this being the anniversary. Like I went over to Microsoft because I actually stream off of Microsoft Edge. I think we get slightly better quality video when I do it for Edge instead of doing it for Brave. Well, every time I had to go in, actually I can just show you guys. What I'm talking about. Every time you go in, you go to their homepage, there's not a single thing relating to it being the anniversary of the attacks. What we got? Oh, Bernie Sanders. Oh, Trump. StreamYards. Oh, Hamas. Oh, Hamas again. Gadgets. Oh, cancer. Oh, deflation. Here's what that means. So I can tell you a lot of these. None of this is nobody realizing what today is? Does nobody in our country realize what happened 82 years ago today? What we were sent into? How the course of our country was forever altered? And you can argue we're still reeling from the effects of what happened 82 years ago? Anything. Does any major mainstream outlet give a crap of what happened 82 years ago? That's like the closest thing we got to World War II. Stunning 3D map reveals while German sailors sank their own submarine. There's a second closest thing to World War II, Oppenheimer, but that's the nuclear bombings. Do we have anything here? Nothing. We have nothing from all these outlets. We have nothing on what happened 82 years ago. And it's going to get worse each year. Each year we get farther removed from the attack. Each year that we lose more and more of those that were there, it's going to get harder to commemorate this. So it's going to be important every year, when not just Pearl Harbor, but for any historical events for the Second World War. We've taken for granted what happened during the Second World War, because I think most of the people that are watching tonight, and we talked about this last week, me and History Saver 1941, we grew up knowing World War II veterans. And same thing with the Vietnam War. We grew up with Vietnam veterans. Even we grew up with Korean War veterans. So it was a real living event. Even though I didn't live through this, I've known people who did live through these events, maybe not being at Pearl Harbor in person, but lived through that time and how it impacted them. So it seemed like, oh, this impacts me as a result. But when those veterans die off, that's when you just notice this great disconnect occur. And it seems right around that time, it seems around 100 years is when people are usually prepared to repeat the mistakes of the past, is what I'm saying. So I'm very nervous about future years as I'm going to try to keep preserving the legacy of what happened in events such as Pearl Harbor, but it's going to get harder and harder with each passing year. So sorry to be a downer like that, but I had to bring that up before I finished, because as I was going to get websites put together, and every time I go back, I'm like, there's nothing. There's nothing here. I remember 10 years ago, there would be all sorts of articles, like commemorative newspapers and stuff, bringing up that this is the day that everything changed for the course of our country. We went from being an isolationist nation to now we're going to become one of the superpowers of the planet. And there's nothing this year. There's nothing this year. Maybe I'm just getting too heated. It is it's not one of the golden years. I've always said that people only really care about historical events when you get to the golden anniversary. So your 10 years and your every 25 years. People love that because it's nice marketing. But I think it's important to remember these events during the off years, the years that we wouldn't normally consider it, because that's when we're not thinking about it, that's when we should be thinking about it. That's at least my mindset. When we're least thinking about it, that's when we're going to know about. Because the moment that you think something cannot happen, and it's absolutely impossible to happen, I have learned from past events that is precisely when it's going to happen. And what happened December 7, 1941? The United States was under the impression, yes, there's going to be some type of move, but no way can it be done by the air. Well, guess what happened? So, thank you guys for tuning in. I'm actually I appreciate the offer, Tim, but I might be crashing for the night. My brain, have you seen the past hour? My brain's going, but we'll see what happens. So, we're going to play the music. If you enjoyed this stream, and by enjoy the stream, you appreciate what people are doing at these various museums and memorials, because I did not do my work tonight. I completely failed tonight, I feel. But if you appreciated what these people are doing, go check out these historical sites. Go support them in any way you can. If it's simply just spreading the word about what they're preserving or a monetary support. If for whatever reason you were entertained by my brain having a circuit blown tonight, hit the like button down below to let the YouTube algorithm know you like Redoubt Productions' brain going kapooey live on air. And if you want to be notified when we go live, which is usually Thursdays at 8 p.m., be sure to subscribe to the channel. Well, we will see you guys next week. But for now, we are going to hit the music. I had to get myself a Z. Oh, no, I'm going to get myself a Z.